So as I said in my last talk, I've been inspired to run these talks because of my own journey with gut issues, and I've learned a lot along the way. I'm giving this information out for free as I just want to help you. And as an empath, it literally pains me to see or hear people who are unwell and that they're not getting the help that they need from the people that we're told can help us. Having said that, from my own studies, experience and research, I'm offering health consulting, including diet and lifestyle. And if there's something I talk about today that resonates with your own experience and you want to know more, do get in touch, as I might be able to help. So today I'm going to talk about something everybody should know. And armed with this information, you can better monitor your health and get the appropriate help early before any conditions get worse. So whilst I'm not a doctor, I studied at the University of London Medical Schools alongside doctors, and I've been following the research for over 20 years. Now, doctors aren't taught much of the information I'm sharing with you today, and yet this should be one of the first things doctors ask you. And I also believe we should be taught this as children. The body is constantly giving you information about how you are, and you really need to listen. One of the major indicators of how well your body is working is gut function. So last time we talked about why you or someone you know may be experiencing some gut issues. And this time we're going to cover why we need to listen to our body, some surprising signs that we might have gut issues, and how we can improve those. So let's start with the role of the gut. The gut is involved obviously in digestion of food, absorption of nutrients, production of postbiotics via a symbiotic or mutually beneficial relationship with our microbiome. And postbiotics are the metabolites created by those good bacteria in our guts that humans need for proper functioning, including vitamins, short-chain fatty acids like butyrate, which protects against colorectal cancer, and they're known to regulate things like anxiety, mood, cognition, and pain. The gut is also obviously involved in excretion of waste. Now that includes food waste, bacteria, and metabolic waste as a result of metabolic processes like energy production. It's also critical in our immune system, and it's important in gut-body interactions in which it participates in feedback loops, such as with the brain and the vagus nerve to regulate body functions. Now, as I mentioned in my previous talk, the gut is now believed to send more signals to the brain than the other way around. As you can see, the gut has a wide variety of functions and impacts on all areas of health and body. So hopefully this will lead you to understand why we might want to monitor our body function. So at a basic level, it can make you feel really unwell if you're not digesting and absorbing food properly. It causes bloating, gas, sluggishness, diarrhea, constipation, and it can cause some more subtle cues, which we'll come on to. It can affect us daily and impact on our ability to enjoy life. Now, we also want to ensure we are digesting and assimilating our food properly to maximize absorption of nutrients and the production of energy. Indeed, we want to avoid being malnourished and the resulting illnesses that will come from that. We want to feed and foster our good bacteria in our guts with the right foods so that they produce postbiotics, as we've previously discussed. And obviously, we want to remove toxins, some of which are excreted through our bowels, and some are excreted in other ways, which we can talk about another time. Now, we want our bowels to be moving regularly because toxins and hormones can be reabsorbed. We don't want them hanging around. And in the toxic world we live in today, it's even more important. And we can talk about that another time. Now, this is especially important in pre- and perimenopausal women, because we can actually reabsorb things like estrogen, which can cause estrogen dominance. Now, this is why eating lots of indigestible fiber is critical for health, as it helps to move your bowels regularly and remove those toxins. And we'll talk about that later. The gut also supports our immune system. And as we discussed last time, 70 to 80% of your immune system is in your gut. It regulates the gut-body feedback system, and we want to ensure we're not putting undue stress on our bodies by kicking that out of balance. And obviously, if we don't take note now, it will create more serious problems later in life, like cancer or Crohn's, in which you might end up having part of your bowel removed, or even neurological diseases like Alzheimer's. This is why everyone in England between the ages of 60 and 74 and registered with a GP is sent a bowel cancer screening kit every 2 years. Now, you may not know that this program is actually expanding to include 56-year-olds from this year. And actually in 2018, the Independent Expert Screening Committee actually recommended this starts even earlier at 50 years old. So I'll ask you, why are we waiting till 50 when you might already have issues? Sharing this information now will prevent someone you know getting bowel cancer or other types of cancer or health issues. So please do share this video. So how do we know our digestive system isn't working well? There are some obvious cues and many more subtle ones. So the major signals that the digestive system isn't working include abdominal pain, bloating, abnormal stool, and that includes diarrhea, constipation, and perhaps more seriously, blood in our stool. And there are more subtle cues like brain fog, fatigue, depression or low mood, anxiety, memory issues, inflammation, including arthritis, and low libido. Now, many of these things could be causing any of these issues, especially the more subtle ones. But as Hippocrates said, all disease starts in the gut. But we're just going to concentrate on those main ones today. And it's important to note here, you can have perfect bowel function, and we'll come on to what that is, but you can still have gut issues like bloating and the more subtle cues. So it's your body telling you that you are not well and it needs attention. We're going to look at that in more detail. Pain and bloating. Well, abdominal pain is self-explanatory. Now, it's true to say that not all pain in the abdomen is indicative of gut issues. It could be muscle cramps, for example. And the different locations and types of pain can indicate different problems, of which there can be many. And there isn't time to go into all of them today. I'm just asking you to be mindful that being in pain is not normal, and it is your body telling you there is something wrong and it needs investigating. Bloating is defined as a distension of the abdomen and a feeling of tightness or swelling, and can be really painful. Now, gas or bloating can be caused by fermentation in your gut or by swallowing air. And we spoke about some of this previously, and we can delve into it deeply another time. Some people even report looking 5 or 6 months pregnant, and I can certainly relate to that. But the area I want to focus on today is something that is quite taboo in our culture, and that is stool or poo. It can tell you a lot about what is going on inside your body if you just pay attention to it. The stool is approximately 75% water and 25% bacteria, undigested fiber, carbohydrates, protein, and fats. Interestingly, one study found between 25 and 54% of dry fecal matter is purely bacteria. Your stool is a byproduct of the process of ingestion, digestion, and other metabolic processes that create waste. So it can tell you a lot about what's going on in your body. And I want to encourage you not to rush to flush, but take a look before you leave the bathroom. Now, the things we can look for in our stool are consistency, ease of passing, quantity, frequency, colour, undigested food, smell, fatty deposits, blood or mucus, and parasites and worms. Now, I'm proud of living in Bristol, and Bristol has many associations with poo. Not only was Bristol famous in the mid-19th century for the guano trade, in which bird poo was imported from South America into Bristol and sold as fertilizer, and it made some people very wealthy, but more recently, Bristol is also known for devising the Bristol Stool Scale or chart, which you can see here. The Bristol Stool Scale is actually a diagnostic tool developed in 1997 by the Bristol Royal Infirmary. It charts the form of feces as a way of assessing disease and measuring changes in response to treatment. So when we come to assess our stool, we can use this scale as a guide. So what are we looking for? Consistency. Ideally, far from a number 2, we actually want a number 3 or 4 on this scale. It would be sausage or snake-like, smooth and soft, and ideally one piece or a few smaller pieces. It should be soft or firm in texture and easy and pain-free to pass. It should not take a long time to pass. If you're in the loo for a long time, anything more than even a few minutes, I'd say there's room for improvement, and you should not be straining. As you can see on the Bristol stool chart, you don't just want a small amount, it should be a decent bulk. And if not, I'd suggest you're not eating enough fibre, and we can talk about this later. Now, I'd like to invite you to have a think about how frequently you have a bowel movement. Maybe you're so busy you don't even notice. So you are technically constipated if you don't have a bowel movement daily. And ideally, you want a healthy bowel movement at least 2 or 3 times a day. I just want you to take that in because I'd say most people aren't meeting this target. Now, I'm reliably informed that GPs are taught that it's okay if you pass a stool once a week. And some people go longer, they go over a month. Now have a think about how often and how much you're eating. Once a week is definitely not okay. And later we'll come on to why it's important, but this is a game changer in your health. Ideally also, you'd be going at the same sort of time every day, and this is indicative of a good balanced diet with a steady flow of fibre throughout the day. And you may find you have bowel movements after eating, and that's because eating triggers peristalsis in the gut, which is the contraction of the gut. If you have trouble moving your bowel, doctors might prescribe you laxatives or even send you for investigations, when all you might need is what I've done for a client recently. By suggesting a minor alteration in their diet, a small addition, I was able to completely free them of constipation with no medication. And this has had major downstream benefits to many areas of their health, which we'll discuss shortly. Medication for constipation is absolutely not necessary and comes with some nasty side effects. So please don't be embarrassed. If you need some help, do let me know. Another thing we can look for is colour. Now, whilst the colour of your stool will vary, it can indicate certain conditions, and it might be affected by medication. But the Bristol stool scale here is actually a bit misleading because the colour on the chart really should be all the same. But the colour of your stool might correlate with what you've eaten, such as greens show up as green stool. Red stool might mean that you've eaten beetroot. Or it might be indicative of a much more serious condition. Now, red stool may indicate blood in the lower part of your digestive tract. And actually, black stool could mean that you're bleeding from higher up in your GI tract. And both of these need investigation. However, you might have black stool just because you've eaten some charcoal, and we can chat about why you might want to do that another time. But if you do have red or black stool and you can't put it down to diet, please go to your doctor for them to refer you for some tests. It's really important to catch this early, as it can be an indicator of cancer and other problems, which I encourage you to take a look at. Now, if you're having regularly pale stools, it can indicate a problem with your biliary system, which comprises your liver, your gallbladder, and your pancreas. I haven't got time to go into that today, but please do go to your doctor if that is a concern. You might also see undigested food, and ideally you wouldn't have any in there, but you might see some more fibrous foods like sweet corn or sweet pepper skins. If it's a lot and not only fibrous foods, it can indicate certain gut issues, including less serious problems of producing insufficient hydrochloric acid and digestive enzymes, or not chewing properly, as we discussed in our last talk. You might also notice a bad smell. Now, that might be caused by bacteria, or it might indicate, again, poor digestion or malabsorption, both of which have underlying causes. You may have an infection, you might have cystic fibrosis, or it might be a result of taking certain medications like antibiotics. You might also see white fatty deposits in your stool, which means you're not digesting and absorbing fat properly. And this can lead to bloating and gas. This is one of the main reasons why you might want to supplement with hydrochloric acid and enzymes to help you digest it properly. And there is a really simple stool test that can be done for this. Blood and mucus. Well, we discussed blood previously, and it must be taken very seriously. Please see your doctor about that. But mucus is also common and can indicate gut issues or infections with things like parasites, bacteria, or yeast. And some parasites can be seen directly in your stool, but others need to be tested for. It is really important to be aware that you don't need to go abroad to pick up parasites. You can pick those up in the US and the UK too. Now, with all this in mind, it is important to monitor the current consistency of your stool and also changes over time. And just because it's normal for you in this instance, it doesn't mean it's healthy. And if you are experiencing any of these issues, please don't ignore them. Now we've discussed what to look for, you might be wondering what affects your bowel function. Well, clearly an obvious one is diet. So food intolerances like dairy, gluten, eggs, and soya are some of the most allergenic ones. But there's less digestible food like legumes, nuts, and seeds, and other foods known as FODMAPs, which are fermentable sugars, that some people really struggle to digest. FODMAPs are actually really important healthy foods. So cutting these out completely for a really long time is not healthy, and it is not a long-term solution. This is one of my major issues with the FODMAP diet. You might also find that processed food affects your bowel function. Now, this might be because of its low fiber content and poor nutrient density due to the fact that it's been processed, or because of certain ingredients, which are often artificial and artificial in quantity. This can affect your gut function and your microbiome. So this is why it's better to eat foods in their whole form rather than processed. In the same way that whole plants are better medication than what the pharmaceutical industry has extracted. And we can talk about that another time. Food additives might also affect your gut function, and they are often not natural and can alter your gut bacteria and therefore cause gut issues, including colitis and cancer. Now, there's growing controversy around many of the additives we put in our food, and this includes the use of things like cellulose gum and polysorbate 80. Now, they may not mean much to you, but they're very, very common emulsifiers used in the manufacture of processed foods like cake, chocolate, and ice cream. And they're also in injectable medicine like vaccines and skincare products. So I'm just asking you to be aware of what you're taking in, and we can talk about that another time. Now, last on the list of diet, but by no means least, is fiber. Gut function is hugely affected by not eating enough fiber, or indeed, for some who aren't used to it, a major increase too quickly can affect your bowel movements. Indigestible fiber creates the bulk and makes it easier to pass, which is what we're looking for. And whilst this fiber might not be digestible to us, it's actually really beneficial to our microbiome and the good bacteria in the gut, which, as we've discussed, is fundamental to our health because they produce these postbiotics needed for proper bodily functions. Examples of good sources of insoluble fiber include nuts, seeds, legumes, fruit, and vegetable skins. And many of these, as we've talked about, are high FODMAPs. So do seek advice if you're on a low FODMAP diet or you think you're reacting to them. Now, many people do not realize that indigestible fiber is actually a carbohydrate, and so not all carbs are bad. And you need to be careful if you're on a low carb diet, and we can talk about that another time. I would say that if you're not used to eating a lot of fiber, again, you need to be really careful to increase it slowly to give your body and the gut bacteria a chance to catch up. And that's something I can help with, so do get in touch. Interestingly, studies have found clear evidence of an inverse relationship between income and fiber intake in differing countries, whereby lower income countries have higher intakes of fiber and higher income countries have lower intakes of fiber. Now, it seems really obvious when you think about what the Western world eats in comparison to perhaps more traditional populations. But I thought it was really interesting, especially when considered alongside the high prevalence of chronic disease in the higher income countries like the US and the UK. Whilst it's not just down to fiber intake, it does play a part. Other things that affect your bowel function are insufficient hydrochloric acid and digestive enzymes, as we discussed in my previous talk. If you missed it, please do look it up on YouTube. Medication can affect your stool, both directly and indirectly. A less known way is some medications actually suppress your stomach acid. So this affects your digestion and it stops you digesting proteins, which can cause gas and bloating, as we discussed last time. If you're not drinking enough water, this can cause or exacerbate constipation. Water is pushed into your large intestine by your body to help with the transit of stool through the gut. And as we said, stool is ideally around 75% water. Microbiome imbalances can also affect your bowel function, and this may be purely due to the foods you eat, which will alter your microbiome, and we can talk about next time, or more directly if you have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which we touched on last time. Parasites, viruses, and bad bacteria can also affect bowel function, and I'm sure we've all had traveller's diarrhea at some point. Movement and exercise can be really beneficial, not just for our cardiovascular system, but exercise helps with peristalsis, which is the movement of food through the gut. And one of the biggest causes of gut issues is stress. And this is one doctors usually put it down to. But clearly, as we've seen here, there are a lot of other possible causes, and I'm sure we could all do with reducing our stress levels from time to time. And finally, there are more serious problems like bowel cancer, colitis, or Crohn's, but these tend to be resultant from less serious issues that have gone unaddressed, which is why you must pay attention to what your body is telling you. So what can we do to improve our bowel function? Well, where appropriate, we should always be looking for the underlying cause of gastric problems and treat these. Now, these often relate to things like diet, lifestyle, and hydration, which we've already talked about. And these things can be directly applied to improve your stool consistency and frequency. I'd encourage you to start with your diet, and this involves inclusion, exclusion, and alteration of foods you're eating. And if you'd like some help, we can discuss what will work for you. You can also do things like ensure you're drinking enough water and bring in exercise and meditation. Now, you could go and see your doctor, and I would always recommend this where you are seeing more serious conditions like blood in your stool. Although, as I've said previously, they're often not taught about basic nutrition and lifestyle required for healthy bowel function, and they might end up just prescribing you medication to manage your symptoms. If you don't believe me, think about the last time your GP asked you about your bowel function. When they greet you, in my humble opinion, the first thing they should be asking you is not how are you doing, but how are you pooing? I would never recommend medication as it is not treating the underlying cause of a problem. They're essentially giving you a big fat sticking plaster to manage your symptoms, and only really, they don't treat the underlying cause, they just treat your symptoms. And what happens is it will not clear up and it may get worse or cause bigger issues as a result. However, the doctors might be able to run some basic tests to exclude certain conditions. If the initial changes in diet and lifestyle don't clear up the problem, I would recommend seeing a nutritionist or a health consultant. And as I said, I'm really happy to help with that. If this hasn't helped and your doctor is not able to help, as I found, I would recommend going to a functional medicine doctor. Now, these are specialized types of Western medicine doctors who've undergone additional training on top of the medical training to understand the root cause of disease. You'd think this was a given in medical training, but I'm afraid it isn't. A functional medicine doctor will look for specific tests to look for underlying causes of sickness, and they will likely give you a permanent fix, which will not usually involve lifetime medication. And as you can imagine, I'm a huge proponent of functional medicine, which isn't well known yet, certainly not in this country, and it's certainly been really helpful for me. So in summary, we've discussed why we might want to monitor bowel function, from the immediate relief from digestive issues to medium-term prevention of ill health as a result of not effectively eliminating toxins, to the longer-term detection and avoidance of serious conditions. The signs your digestive system isn't working, including pain, bloating, gas, and irregular and abnormal bowel movements, and the more subtle cues like brain fog and fatigue. What abnormal bowel function looks like, and the use of the Bristol Stool Scale as a useful guide. What can affect your bowel function, how to improve it with things like diet, lifestyle, and hydration. And we've talked about when it's appropriate to go to the doctor and what they may or may not be able to do for you. And if you're getting a permanent solution if you're not getting a permanent solution without medication, there are other sources of help like coming to me or going down the more expensive route of functional medicine. As I've said, I'm giving you this information out for free as I just want to help and stop any bigger diseases manifesting. But if you think you need more help in any area of your diet, life or lifestyle or health, not just gut health, or a more personalized approach, you're welcome to contact me for some consultancy. My email is on the bottom of all the slides. It's info@holisticwellnesscentre.com, holistic with a W. So as we're running down on time on Zoom, for those of you that have a question, you're really welcome to raise it publicly now or use the chat box if you haven't already, or feel free to email me on the email address. Please do let me know whether this was useful and what other topics you might want to cover, and I will send out the recording. And I'll do another one of these in a month on what we should be eating and why, so I'll send out those details soon. If you're enjoying these talks and finding them useful, please do share them with friends, as they're welcome to join in, and I'm keen to get that message out there. So I'm just going to check the chat box and see if anyone's got any questions. It looks empty. Does anyone want to raise a question? Okay then. So until then, I'd encourage you just to slow down, listen to your body, don't rush to flush, and tune in. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Andy.